Okay, let's look at using textalign. So previously we were working with text formatting using font family. And now we're going to look at a property of textalign. So if you use a resource like W3 Schools, again, previously we were working with fonts, but now it's textalign, so we can select CSS text, and then we scroll down to find different properties and their values. So if we look at textalign, we have center, left, right. You can also justify type, but with just a headline that might not work so well. So we'll just go with center. So I'm going to go ahead and copy textalign center. If I copy it, then I probably won't make a spelling error. I can't guarantee it. So I'm going to paste. And you'll notice that there's an extra space here. Some people like that extra space when they code, some do not. I tend to not include the space. Just be consistent. That's what's important. All right, so we're setting our textalign center. So we're going to save. Let's just take a look. So we'll update our page. And in fact, our text does center. All right, so we're also going to work with line height and letter spacing, margins, and padding. So to be able to see what's going on, what we need to do is we need to put a border around our H1. That way you can see exactly what's going on. Okay, so it'll make everything more visual. So let's do border, and we're going to have a border of 1 pixel. The type of border will be solid, and let's just make our border black and then our semicolon, and we'll save, and we will update our page. And you're going to see a border, and remember H1 is a block level element, so it goes all the way across the page. But you'll notice there's some default space up here, and there's some default space on the left and the right. Okay, that's because the browser has margin around the body of the element. Okay, or I should say the body of the document. And then this space is actually being affected by the margin of the H1. All right, so this space up here is being affected because the H1 has margin by default. And if you don't change that margin, you're going to get that default margin. And that sort of messes with people sometimes. All right, so let's just go back. And what we're going to work with is line height. All right, so we have a single piece of text here. So if we were to change, or if we were to, I'm going to leave the border part at the bottom. So let's just type in line height. And the font size we're working with right now is 36. So I'm going to set my line height to 36 pixels, like so. Let's see what happens. All right, so we're going to save. And then let's go and update our preview. Okay, now what's happening is this is basically centering this type inside of this element. Okay, inside of the H1. So let's change, instead of 36, let's change this to 18 pixels, and then save, and then we'll update. Okay, see how we're moving that text around? It's kind of like in typography where you're moving your leading, you're changing space between lines. It's similar, but it's not exactly the same how it's calculated. But just know that you're moving that space in relationship to the point size you're working with. All right, so if we go back here and let's set our line height back to 36, and we'll save. And next, we have letter spacing. So after line height, we'll do letter spacing. I'm going to call this out in pixels also. Let's do 2 pixels, and we'll save. And you'll see that our line height has come back correctly, and we're adding pixels in between each of the characters. So let's try something a little more obvious. Let's go with 10. And we'll update. Okay, so we're adding letter spacing. It's also called, in typography, we would call this tracking. Okay, so margins and or padding. Now, to really see what's going on here, let's go ahead and I'm going to change the width of our H1 to, let's just make this 500 px. Make sure I have a colon. Okay, so my width of this H1 will be 500 px. Okay, and then the textalign will be center. So let's save and let's see what happens. All right, so my element is still starting over on the left-hand side, which it should, but now my element is 500 pixels wide. So let's go back, and after letter spacing, we'll press return, and we will add margin, and I'm just going to type in 0 on the margin. Okay, and we will save. Now 0 can be pixels or it can be percentages, so let's just see what happens. Okay, so we've reduced that default margin that is at the top of our H1. We still have some space. That is the padding. Then the margin, which are the body of the document has by default. All right, and we'll talk about that more later. Okay, so if we wanted to do something a little bit like this, what if we wanted 20 pixels and on the top? So we would go around clockwise. So 20 pixels would be the top. Now, what's going to happen is the next is the right-hand side. There's all kinds of space on the right-hand side, so I'm just going to put in a 0 for right now, which is, could be pixels, could be percent, could be either, okay? But 0 is one where we don't have to put the actual unit. All right, let's move the bottom 50 pixels. So we're going to move anything away underneath 50 pixels away. And now we have the left. And let's do 100 pixels on the left. And we will save. And let's go ahead and preview. And you can see that we have called out how much space we want on the top, how much space we're going to push the next element away, and then we're pushing H1 away from the left hand of the side by X amount of pixels. All right. Now, I believe the next one was padding. All right, so if after margin we drop down and do padding. So padding is inside, margin is outside. I use the border to demonstrate the difference between, or the separation between the two. So now on padding, if we want all of our padding to be the same, let's go 20 px, like so, okay? And we will save, and let's update our page here. and you'll see that now the padding is what's inside. And we are pushing 20 pixels down, 20 pixels from the bottom. Now we might be coming over 20 pixels here, but this element is wider, meaning the actual H2 is wider than the type. So we don't really see an effect. But in fact, there is, if you can imagine, an imaginary line here and here on that padding. Okay? All right, so we have been working with what is called the CSS Box model. And in the next video, we're going to talk about the modern version of the box model and how it's different from what we're just starting to explore here.